This is an overview of the midterm for Soc 250. The midterm is composed of 4 questions. You will be randomly assigned 2 of these questions, so make sure you understand that. It's a random assignment. You don't get to pick which ones that you are going to answer, okay? And as always, you have 2 attempts. So if you don't do as well as you would have hoped after I've graded that first attempt, you are certainly welcome to take it again. And some people, they like to log in, see which 2 they get, and if they weren't prepared for the 2 they got assigned, they try again and then hope that the 2 that they get the next time are the ones that they prepared for. Not a great way to do it, but I can certainly tell when people do that. So let's get started here. 4 questions coming from chapters 1, 3, 4, and 5. So the first question is from chapter 3. Explain how the 3 perspectives, and remember those 3 perspectives are always the functionalist, the conflict, and the symbolic interactionist perspectives, analyze culture. Give examples to support your decision. Okay, so remember that anytime that you are writing an essay, it's not enough just to make a statement. You must also explain the statement. You must support that statement with examples and details. So don't just say the functionalist perspective views culture as creating conflict within society. Some cultures are viewed as more valuable and others are viewed as inferior. While that is true, go on then to tell me, what are some of the things that you see in society, either currently or in the past, where that has occurred, where perhaps one culture was viewed as superior and another was viewed as inferior? Again, it can be current or it can be past. So I hope you get the idea here. You're making certain to explain your statements. I can't read your mind. You've got to tell me that you understand the concept. Just making a statement doesn't tell me that. Explain cultural relativism and discuss how it can be helpful in studying society. Okay, so remember that cultural relativism is about trying to understand another culture, another society from the perspective of that culture or that society. And again, give me an example of how we can do that. And then you can tell me, how is the use of cultural relativism helpful in studying society? For sociologists, why is it useful? Provide at least one example. Define ethnocentrism and explain how ethnocentric people can harm society. Remember that ethnocentrism is about 180 degrees opposite of cultural relativism. Ethnocentrism, recall, is the belief that your culture, your way of doing things is better than someone else's or than another group's way of doing things or thinking. And how is that perhaps harmful when people do that? I can think of lots of examples, but just one off the top of my head, you could think of the anti-Semitism that took hold in Germany under Hitler, and how that spread to bigotry toward other groups within not only Germany but other countries that Germany began to conquer. So here, provide at least 2 examples. Question number 2 is from chapter 1. Explain the functionalist, conflict, symbolic interactionist perspectives approach to studying society and how each perspective analyzes social media in the US. Okay, so this should be pretty easy for all of you because I asked you to write a paper that did exactly this. So to prepare for this, you can just go back and review your paper. And you could, since you wrote it, you could even use your paper, parts of your paper, to answer this question because it is your work. Explain sociological imagination. Discuss how this concept can be useful to the study of society. Remember that sociological imagination was a concept developed by C. Wright Mills. And the idea is that if we try to understand the intersection between a person's biography and their history, then we might be able to better not only understand but help that person with their issues. If we don't do that, then we're simply judging people based upon what we see when we don't really understand their whole situation. So for this part of the question, I want you to explain the sociological imagination, and then how is this concept helpful to the study of society? Why are sociologists proponents of using the sociological imagination? Finally, choose one of the following and discuss two of their most essential ideas: Emil Durkheim, Max Weber, and Karl Marx. Recall that there is some detail about each of these three individuals. You only have to choose one and discuss two of their most essential ideas. All right, so since you're only choosing one, I expect that you'll go into some detail about some of their most essential or important ideas. Don't just say Max Weber hated capitalism and promoted socialism. That is true, but it doesn't really tell me much about why Weber thought that socialism was better than capitalism, right? I think you get the picture here. Provide two reasons this person is important to sociology. Question number 3 is from chapter 5. Explain George Ritzer's concept of McDonaldization and discuss whether you agree that McDonaldization is widespread. Provide two reasons for your opinion. Remember that McDonaldization is the concept that George Ritzer created. He essentially is arguing that much of society today, including things such as banks, coffee shops, stores, that much of society has followed the example of McDonald's and focused on efficiency and consistency. Ritzer argues that that may work well for some things, like for McDonald's, but maybe it doesn't work so well in some of our other social institutions. Okay. Here's an example of that. In many fast food places, when you walk in today, there are little tablets, and you don't even have to talk to a person. You can just order your food. You'll get a number that you choose or that's assigned to you, and then all you have to do is wait for your number to be called, and you go pick up your food. You don't have to talk to anybody if you don't want to. Same thing with self-checkouts at stores or supermarkets, etc. You don't have to talk to anybody. But Ritzer's making the argument that perhaps that impersonalization is not a positive thing. And he argues that it's so widespread and that people have just accepted it without really thinking about whether it's a good thing. So what do you think? Do you agree with him or not? Provide two reasons for your opinion. Discuss one primary group and one secondary group in your life. Now remember, you're focusing on your life, not somebody else's, not your mom's or your sister's, your life. And explain two positive things you get from being in each group and at least one potentially negative thing you experience from time to time in each group. Remember, no group is perfect. All right, so here I'm asking you to really focus on your life and a primary group in your life, whether that's family or friends or your significant other or some other group in your life, that's your primary group, and then your secondary group, whether that's your workplace or your teammates or whatever that other group is. There are two different kinds of groups that we all have in our lives. And so reflect on which group is your primary group, which one is your secondary group. And I'm only asking you to talk about one of each. Most of us have multiple primary groups and secondary groups. Explain two positive things you get from being in each group. So two positive things about being in your primary group, two positive things about being in your secondary group. But then I also want you to reflect and think about what's at least one potentially negative thing that you experience from time to time. As I said, there's no group that is perfect. Here's an example. You may love your family. Your family may be your primary group. However, I'm fairly certain that most of you experience at least one negative thing from time to time within your family, okay, whatever that might be. If you're the youngest in the family, for example, maybe people don't always think of you as grown up. Maybe they always think of you as the baby, and so they perhaps try to tell you what to do or how you should do things because they're trying to protect you, right? So you think about that, reflect upon it. Explain how each group has influenced or shaped who you are today. So how has your primary group shaped you or influenced who you are today? Also, your secondary group, how has that shaped or influenced who you are today? Again, I'm asking you to just really reflect upon these two groups in your life. The last question is from chapter 4. Explain socialization and discuss the 4 agents. Explain both Cooley's looking glass self-theory and Mead's theory. Be sure to outline the components of each theory. Okay, so remember, socialization is the process by which society transmits its norms and values to its members so that we can all be on the same page. We can all learn how to live within a society. So we learn the norms and the values. We learn what is expected of us, what we should not do. All of that is part of socialization. And the 4 agents that are discussed in the text are family, peers, schools, and the media. Those 4 agents socialize us. None of us becomes who we are in a vacuum without any outside experiences or influences. So then you go to the next part. After you've discussed the 4 agents, make sure you're discussing them fully. Don't just say, family teaches us things we need to know to leave the house and become independent. That's true. But what kinds of things? What are those things? Give me the detail. Peers. Peers help us understand dating. That's true. But what else do they do? Okay? Peers are more than just teaching us how to date. Right? What about friendships and how to make friends and keep friends, etc.? Okay, so make sure that you're really thinking deeply about each of these prompts. Don't just give me a little glib statement for each part of the prompt and think you're done. I'm giving you 80 minutes to complete this. So I want substantive answers because I know I'm giving you the study guide ahead of time. You can use your textbook to look things up while you are taking the test. You can look at your notes, etc. I expect substantive answers, that is, answers that have details and examples that are full answers, not just short, concise little bursts. I asked you also to explain Cooley's looking glass self-theory and Mead's theory, and to be sure to outline the components of each theory. So remember, don't just tell me that Mead's theory has 3 stages. That's true. But what are those 3 stages? And don't just name the 3 stages. Explain what each one of those stages is. Which of the agents of socialization, as you discussed above, currently have the most influence on you and why? So, when you think about these 2 theories, Cooley's looking glass self-theory and Mead's theory, after you've explained them both, I want you to reflect on yourself, on who you are. And I want you to consider which one of those 2 theories, scratch that. It's the agents of socialization. So those 4 agents, family, media, schools, and peers, which of those, it might just be one, it might just be 2, it might be all of them, but which currently have the most influence on you and why? Not in the past, but currently. Maybe it's still your family. Maybe it's your peers now. Maybe it's maybe it's school now. Whichever one it is, or ones, you can choose more than one. Okay, explain why that agent has the most influence on you currently. Is that different from when you were in elementary school? Okay, so then you think about, well, when I was in elementary school, maybe my family was more important socializing agent, or maybe it was my peers. And is that different from what you talked about in terms of your current influence? Okay, I'm really, again, trying to really get you to reflect and think about how these concepts can help explain who you are, why you are who you are. Why do you think that today's influence is or is not different from when you were younger? Right? So here's an example. Maybe a student says, currently my family has the most influence on me, and gives a couple reasons, examples why. When I was in elementary school, my family was the most important agent, socializing agent for this couple reasons. Why is it the same today? Well, that student would then have to reflect, well, why is that the same? Somebody else, maybe family when they were in elementary school, maybe now peers, or maybe now school. Why is it different now? I want students to reflect on why your socializing agents, your most important socializing agent, is either the same or different from when you were younger and today. That is it. I will say this, some students answer all 4 of these questions, and they do it in great detail because they do it ahead of time. And then they log in to take the test. And when they see which of the 2 questions they were assigned, they copy and paste that one answer into the submission box. They copy and paste the other answer into the second submission box, and they click submit, and they're done. I'm okay with students doing that because it's their work. They did the preparation, and they want that A so much that they're willing to write out their full answers. There are other students who make an outline. They don't maybe write it all out, but they make an outline. Make it in a Word document or a Google document. They make an outline. They put some points in there that they know they can elaborate on. And then when they are assigned their 2 questions, they copy and paste that outline into the submission box, and they type up their answers, the rest of their answers, go to the next question, do the same thing, and hit submit. However you prepare for this midterm, know this. As long as you actually are making an effort to prepare for answering each part of the prompt, because you see that these prompts have multiple sections, and you're making an effort to explain your statements and give me the details and examples that support your statements, you'll probably do decently, if not very well, depending upon which of the whether you take the tactic of outlining or writing the whole answers out ahead of time. Obviously, the way not to prepare is to just wing it, log in and see what you get and hope for the best. But you know what kind of student you are, so that's it.